Hi there, it's Vicki Boutin here, excited to share my project that I created for Soul Journey. I played with watercolors and made a fun little junk journal page. I hand drew some flowers and used some stamps and some texture with some paste, and I wanted to share the supply list with you here, and then we'll get right into the project. So I gathered my supplies. I have some stamping ink, a paper cup, some water brushes, some paints, and a Sharpie, and then my art crayons, and then watercolor paper background, and some plastic wrap. And then I used all of these with some stamps and stencils to create a fun and simple background. So the cup, the whole idea with the cup is that I could create my own layered circles with some stamping ink, and I thought it would work great with watercolor. So I like to use my junk journal as kind of a warm-up page. Most of you would know me as a scrapbooker first, but I do love mixed media art. So I just kind of laid out a pattern and then double stamped each of the cup images to create some flower backgrounds, or actually circles for right now. And then I'm grabbing some of my new watercolors to create the pattern. So I went ahead and filled the spaces in with some clean water, and then chose my palette of watercolor to create the circular background. So I love when you float clean water and then put your watercolor in a wet background. It's very forgiving, so it creates a fun technique. And then I went in and added a couple more layers of color. So once this was all placed, I thought it would be kind of interesting to create a background in the wet watercolor with some plastic wrap, which I'm going to add there in a second. So I just cut some plastic wrap into squares and then placed it onto the wet paint, and then kind of gathered it and let it sit there. And then I went ahead and filled in a couple more of the circles, again filling with some clean water and then floating a wet technique of watercolor. So I picked a little bit of a purple color and floated it in there. I usually use a lot of pink and yellows, but I thought it'd be kind of nice to have a cool palette with this. And I don't know where I was looking through. I think I saw some art with some watercolor backgrounds and thought it would be fun to put one in my junk journal. And then the saran wrap creates a fun textural background. So the water's not so clean anymore, but because I'm going in with a turquoisey blue, I'm okay with that. I still want to float the wet paint into the wet background, so I don't have any harsh lines. Just filling that in there, putting some more saran wrap, and then I have one more circle to go. But you can see where it's in contact, it creates a really fun pattern. So I just want to fill this last one in. And when that was done, I actually let it dry. Because if you lift the paper before the paint dries underneath, you won't get that textural effect. So I went ahead and put that in there, the saran wrap or plastic wrap on there, and I went to lift, and I knew it has to dry for a little bit. So you could cheat a little bit with a heat gun. You just don't want to melt your background. So these ones are dry, and I love that effect. So simple, right? Just add a little bit of the plastic wrap. So I wanted to continue building this floral background with circle stamps. So I went in with my new circle stamp set and black ink, and you want to make sure it's an ink that's going to work with watercolors so that it doesn't move around when you add a little bit of the moisture. And I just continued to build the background using a couple of different stamps. So that's fun. And like I said, I'm traditionally a scrapbook artist, but I do love to do junk journal in practice. I like to use, I don't really traditionally art journal, but I do like to kind of have a recipe book with techniques. And I also love that there's no pressure for photos with these. I can just kind of go in and play with different mediums and different techniques, and then I have something to reference if I wanted to paint a whole background or use these in mini books or in my traveler's notebook. But this kind of goes in my Junque Journal binder, which is part of the Vicki Boutin mixed media line. So I just went in and added some watercolor into those stamped images. It's a pretty loose technique, and just tying the colors that were kind of already down there in the textured backgrounds. But I really love how this page was coming together. And then I did tap a few of these dots, but you're going to notice that I decided to add some more color into the open areas, and we lose a lot of those dots, so I just went in and added them again later. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but I'm sure you guys will bear with me. So here again, I'm just filling that background with what should be clean water, but it is a little blue from the first layer of color that went down. And then I'm going to put a little yellow watercolor in there and a little bit of green, so it accents the blues and purples really nicely. So I like to, again, paint in wet. It's a lot more forgiving. And then I'm going to add a little bit of green and then a little bit more water and just kind of move the pigment around. But it's kind of nice to do that wet background. And then you'll see what I like to do to kind of create textures. You just crumple up a paper towel and lift some of the pigment off. And that makes for, again, like the plastic wrap, a nice textural background. And I floated some more water and pigment in and just continued to fill in the background. So once these are done, when I did the other page as well, you just want that to completely dry before you move on to the next step. So again, I'm just going in and adding, there's water in the background and then some pigment to fill in that background space. I love watercolor. It is can be fairly forgiving and really can fill in your backgrounds quickly. I do also like to use acrylic, and in a second I'm also going to use my art crayons, which are another one of my favorite tools. So again, just took the clean paper towel, moving it around and lifting some of the pigment off. So it just makes for a nice light background without any sharp lines. And then I went in and tapped some pigment into the background with a wet brush. You'll see, because the background's still wet, that these dots kind of disperse. I waited for it to dry a little bit and then added some more solid dots. It's just another way to add some depth. And then I decided I wanted some texture and actually to do some detailing when I'm going to create those flowers inside the cup backgrounds. I took some of my gold glaze, which is nice because it's completely water soluble. So I'm just going to go in there and start drawing some gold lines and some centers in these flowers that I'm creating. I don't have a stamp that's this big, so I thought it'd be fun when we did the background with the cups. I like to use a lot of found objects. And then I'm just going in and tracing or sketching in some little gold lines, which is really nice to have that kind of metallic accent. So like I said, I just went around excuse me, and filled in a pattern of really tight lines. And you'll find that you want to play with the consistency of the glaze, but with it being 100% water soluble, it works great as a texture base, which you're going to see in a little bit because I'm going to use that, but it also works great as a paint. So this is going to take a little while because I have 4 flowers to fill in, so just kind of bear with me. But I did choose to use a lot of the Vicki Boutin mixed media for these pages. I think that you can find it, a lot of you ladies I believe are in Australia. They are carrying it at some of the bigger wholesalers, so I'm sure you can get your hands on it. And if you can't, it's fine. Just use whatever you can find. If you have a different type of gold texture paste or even gold watercolors, you could do this technique. You could even do it with distress ink or anything that's water soluble, whatever mediums you like to use. So I'm just going to pause for a little bit and let you see how I finish these flowers with the metallic background. So I just have the finishing touches with the flowers and putting the gold lines on. And then I'm going to move into adding a little bit of detail in the background of my page. I'm using my art crayons, which are water soluble, but I am using them dry with a stencil brush, and then a stencil of choice, just a simple background stencil. Just go ahead and you add the art crayon right onto a non-porous background, and then pick up the art crayon with the stencil brush. It is super simple and creates tons of pigment in the background. So I laid the stencil on, and then I'm just in a circular motion applying that art crayon. Again, it's a dry technique, but I love the layer of texture and detail on the background. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and move in with onto the second page. And I put the light green, but I'm going in with a darker turquoisey green to add a little bit more interest on those circles. Super simple. And then I thought the gold looks really pretty, but it needs a little bit of detail. So there's my hat too. Just came back from Zumba when I did this. And I am just adding some detail onto those flowers with a little black Sharpie. So I'm just kind of going beside the gold lines and making like a starburst flower. I want to fill in all 4 of the patterns, and then I'm going to also stamp in the center of these because I like the little sketchy bit, but I thought it would look nicer with a stamped background layered on top. So again, that's my circle set of stamps, and I just love circles because you can make so many different things with them. So I went ahead and just stamped on the center of the circles with a little bit of a black dot circle stamp, and now I just want to put some stems on the flowers. So I just used my stamp block or any straight edge that you have and drew in some stems on the flowers, and then I'm using the watercolor again to color in those stems. So super simple technique, but it's really cute. And even if drawing isn't your forte, what's nice when you have a simple circle shape, you can make beautiful flowers. And then again, I tapped some of the green paint in the background to add some detail. And I'm going in with some of the gold glaze with a script stencil and a palette knife, and it just adds a nice layer of sparkly texture. And I'm just going to move that around the page and add a couple of areas with the glaze. The glaze adds a perfect finishing touch to this page, and to finish it up, I just went ahead and added a title and a little bit of embellishment, but that really came together quickly, and I love the end result. And I'm so happy you let me be a part of Soul Journey, and I would love if you come to visit me on my social media. I have it listed here at the end. Again, thanks so much, and I can't wait to see what you create.